How do we assist every company in the US that has a financial arm? So now we're looking at it like the world is being democratized where the smaller guys can have a lot of the same empowerment in downturns. Great companies are created.
I'm Christian Gannon, the co-founder of ENG Media. So I understand that JustPaid is a financial platform that helps companies control their spend and gives them financial oversight. You help customers make, receive, and track payments, understand their finances with analytics, and identify opportunities, all with AI. Could you explain a little bit about your business and your role you play within it, Daniel?
Sure. So there's kind of I would call it systemic problem that's happening in the US where you have a lot of finance people that are not going into the industry. And what we're seeing is less graduates coming out of university year after year. And there are a lot of articles. I actually read one last week on this problem and how there's just a lot less throughput and support in the finance world. So you look at like large public companies, some of them are actually having delayed reporting sometimes because they simply don't have the staff. You're seeing like large accounting firms push off, extending out, like getting extensions on their taxes and those sorts of things. So every business in the United States needs a finance team, a finance arm, and an accounting arm. What we're seeing is the world is shifting where a lot of people are moving away from that industry. There's a downtick in the number of people going in to get degrees in that industry. We're trying to focus on how we can help support the US and the world in basically re-optimizing for a lot of these functions to be done in a AI type of way. And every company needs to get paid, right? So our company is called JustPaid. So every company is basically looking to get accounts receivable optimized. And what is accounts receivable? It's basically you send out an invoice, you send out 2 invoices, you send out 10 invoices, you send out 1,000 invoices. Some of those are not going to get paid. And there's complexity in contracts and those sorts of things. So we are a B2B company, a business to business company. And essentially what we're doing is we're looking at business to business companies and saying, okay, you have an agreement with this company and that company. This company is obligated to pay you X amount per month. We want to be that conduit to allow that payment to happen as easy as possible. And what does that mean? It means there's different parts of our platform that people could leverage. One of them being contract AI. Contract AI is basically if you negotiate and redline a contract and there are payment terms in there, generally a human being looks at the contract and says, okay, how do I invoice for this? If it's a complex contract, it could take 3 hours, 2 hours, 5 hours to really decipher what was negotiated in this contract when there's, say, whatever it is, hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line or, millions of dollars on the line. So essentially what we're doing is saying you don't need to have all of your finance people looking at every piece of this. We could take those contracts, our AI will parse them, understand them, break them up into different segments like, okay, who needs the invoices to go to them? Then we look at other things like, okay, what are the terms in there? Like, we call them line items. Like, okay, there's a line item that says they owe us $3,000 a month. That's one line item. There's another line item that says there is some usage-based fee, or there's, some fee in there that's like variable. Okay, so we put that in there. And then there's other like terms that could be put in there, like discounts or any others, let's say interesting terms. The AI will basically take that document, understand it completely, and then parse it out and bifurcate and create many invoices from a contract. We've seen the first stage of all of this working. The first line of defense for all of this was originally like DocuSign and Dropbox Sign and Hello Sign and all of these different document signing products where for the first time in history, people were signing things online, and really COVID just pushed us completely to that new, experience where you're just basically, you can do a lot of this stuff online now, which is so different. The problem is we didn't take it to the next step, which was, can we have not only have like digitization of like document signing, but the next step is like digitization of like what happens in this document after it's signed. It just is, it sits there. So What we do is we grab that, the AI figures out what to do, then that magically does that. We send out the invoices. We have a dunning process, which basically does a lot of figuring out when the invoices need to go out and then reminders of when they need to get paid on those specific invoices. And, I think the world is changing very quickly. And I think as you have less finance and accounting people in departments, they're working harder and harder to like get stuff done. So we're envisioning a world where like you can have less people, but you'll have AI as like an assistant that will help you remind people to collect the revenue. So the reminder AI, that's another piece of our software. Is, reminding them in a nice way, hey, this needs to get paid. You have 5 invoices outstanding. We know you're good for it, but just a heads up, here it is again. That sort of thing. So that's it. That's us at a high level. It's kind of like the 5-minute pitch of the company.
Of course. That's awesome. And I've heard not only just in the finance and accounting space, but also in other spaces, agentic like AI is being used a lot, especially like you were kind of saying, there's some industries that are really niche and it's hard to find good employees that can really understand the industry. And so using agentic AI to help with tasks from day to day and also just free up time, right? Like if I don't have to spend 2 hours on reading that invoice or that contract, right? And I can pay Daniel's company at JustPaid to do it in 30 minutes, right? And I already have all the documents ready. I mean, that's a huge point, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, as companies scale, the problem gets worse. As sure, you start a company and you have 5 invoices, it's manageable. 10 invoices, it's manageable. 100 invoices might be manageable. But once you hit like 5,000 invoices, if you're generally scaling a company like beyond a certain point, it becomes unmanageable. And the de facto before the AI revolution was just to hire people. Hire 3 people in accounts receivable. And then, there are these moments of like stress. Like I just got off a call with a tax team, and this tax team is doing all this accounting work for personal taxes, and then they're doing it for businesses. And basically they were saying like some of this stuff was invoiced and not collected, and they have like one person in this like huge firm that's doing all of this work, and they're missing the boat in some of the revenue. They don't want to fire their clients. It's just, some of the revenue like is 5 months old. It's like it's sitting there, right. It's not collected. And then, the head accounting person on the team basically looks at his team and is like, hey guys, what's going on with these accounts? And then of course they pick up the slack, but it's an ebb and flow of stress. Like it's kind of like a whack-a-mole. But it's very repetitive tasks. Like people's time is valuable. You can use other tools now to like get some of that stuff done. And what does that even mean? Like big vision for me is agentic AI literally means it will understand how to write and curate an email to a customer. Say it's a good customer and you want them to continue to be a customer. But say they have 3 or 4 or 5 invoices that are outstanding. What do? You hire somebody generally, and that person will negotiate and figure out a way to get that payment like paid in. What we're looking at it is, let's take a step back. Let's have AI look at this stuff. Let's have AI draft some of these emails. In the future, we want to get beyond that and say, okay, escalation, maybe a phone call from AI would be great. Escalation, a text from an AI would be great. Just to keep that person like aware they're 5 invoices behind. And it may not be intentional. Sometimes it's just, life gets busy and people are working on so many different projects that some things get pushed to the sideline. But, if you don't have people following up, things just don't happen. We're looking at it like, how do we assist every company in the US that has a financial arm? But also think about it like this. You're democratizing what it means to like have a financial arm. Like, smaller companies with 2 people, with 3 people, with 5 people, they generally do not have a full-time accounts receivable person. They just don't. So now we're looking at it like the world is being democratized where the smaller guys can have a lot of the same empowerment that the larger, more profitable companies have, where they can hire a staff of like 6, 7, 10, 25 people. Smaller companies are now going to be able to do that also. So it's really, the world is going to shift very quickly over the next few years, where you're going to see a lot of these more agentic companies and just what they can do. And it's going to blow your mind in some of the things they can do.
100%. And I think it also starts to level the playing field a little bit, right? Not only in the finance space, but in other industries too. When you have agentic AI like taking off, for example, my tasks, or let's say someone owns a tax accounting case, like what you're kind of talking about, and they can do all the taxes, they can do all the books. Like now you can compete with bigger tax firms, right? So I think that's a big shift, and I think it's something important to note as well. And kind of transitioning into that, a follow-up question it is in the landscape right now, what is making your job more challenging, or on the flip side, a little bit easier to operate in right now?
There is a lot of noise out there right now with a lot of new tools. So it's very,
Of
very
course.
hard to know what is a good tool and what's a bad tool. So for me, a challenge is standing above the crowd, right? A
Hmm.
lot of these are, I'd call them like ephemeral tools, meaning they seem okay, but then they go away. And there's a
Got it.
lot of these
Okay.
ephemeral tools coming up here and there, and you kind of are like, oh, this looks amazing. Will it stay? Is it lasting? Will it be useful like for the long term, right?
Hmm.
An example is VS Code. So Microsoft put out VS Code and it's an awesome editor. It's a bit ephemeral because Cursor came along, right? And a lot of new tools are coming along where they're just kind of moving so quickly, and Cursor might be overtaken by something else if they don't innovate quickly. So a lot of tools are becoming very ephemeral where they stick for a small period of time and then they just disappear. And I think this ephemerality, as I'm calling it, it applies to companies in general. So you're going to see a
Hmm.
lot of companies coming and going at a faster rate, like companies on the S&P 500. You know, they would stay for a certain period of time in the past. Maybe it was, I think it was 7 years. You'd have a large company come in with lots of revenue, come into the S&P 500, be very sticky, stay there for years. I think things are changing where the large vendors have to really be nimble and quick on their feet to stay in the S&P 500. But if that's happening at the larger scale, think about what's happening at the smaller scale with the smaller startups. The same thing where if they're not innovating very, very, very quickly, they're going to be outdated within like weeks or months, which is insane. Literally
100%.
every week my team is looking at new tools. Every week we're saying what can we do with less people, right? So like we keep our team, but it's like, you know, in the past when people were stressed out and they were at a breaking point, they would hire more people. Now companies are saying, well, okay, what tools are out there that can make your job easier for you instead of hiring more people? So they're becoming way more efficient, but they're also switching tools in and out way more fast. So it's a challenge out there to stand above the crowd and say like, hey, this is a useful tool, because there's so much noise happening.
Of course, and I actually wanted to touch a little bit on that as well. The amount of companies that I've seen with agentic tools that have been seed funded in the past year has skyrocketed, and you've probably seen it too, and that's kind of what you're talking about. And exactly, you hit it on the head of the nail. Like it's hard to decipher what is noise and what's really going to help a company, right? And some IT services are starting to get into that mix a little bit in the implementation and understanding maybe a business's problems first and then recommending solutions, but it's still really early on and it's tough to really tell. Like maybe, and some of the products aren't cheap either is the problem. So for a small business, that might be the make or break for a green or a red year, right? If I pay for this tool and it doesn't work out how it should or it underperforms, then that could be the difference between me making profit this year or spending money on something that is not going to help my company at all, right? So
That's exactly right. For you, what would you say? What is above the crowd right now, where you see something and you're like, this will stick in this new world?
honestly, I think it's really tough. I think a couple of the media ones where it's specifically directed towards advertising, I think that's a big push right now. And I've seen a couple companies that have gotten really good at making AI video, AI advertisement, and it takes 10 minutes, right? That's a game changer. You don't have to have a whole media department now, right? Where that's hundreds of thousands of dollars, film equipment, everything, right? If I can film a short and then have AI make me a full commercial, I mean, that's a huge push and change in the market. But other than that, it's a lot of it is noise. But moving on a little bit, could you tell me a little bit about exactly what you do at JustPaid and how your days typically kind of unfold from start to finish?
Sure. I mean, being a founder is, yeah, I would say it's like a jack of all trade and just helping support the team. For me, there's different legs of the stool. I would say one of them being One is recruitment, right? So you want to always be evangelizing the company in that way and making sure you hire the best people. Interviewing people takes time, thinking about who the right people are and building that culture is super important. You want a culture that you want to work at, right? So find people that you like love working with, and those are the people you want to hire. So I'm doing a lot of that where I'm finding the right people and evangelizing the company and making sure like people want to work with us. And I think candidly, something out there is strange in the market where there's just so many people applying for jobs now at our company, right? And this might be a systemic problem that's bigger than our company, where we have so many applications coming in per day and we only have like, say, one position, right? Mm-hmm. What do you do with literally like 10,000 applications? Who do you hire? And I think this is just a problem a lot of companies have. So we're looking at tools there. I'm spending time there and just figuring out who are the right people that are a cultural fit, who are people that are trustworthy, who are people that embrace like working at a startup and the stress of it. Can they do something amazing in our company? We're primarily like an engineering company. So I think, do they have the traits of like a good developer? And what is that? For me, it's like someone that can code very quickly and kind of gets it. And, if one of our customers basically has an issue, iterating quickly and just making sure that whatever their issues are resolved. Another is product, just making sure our product team is moving in full force and the engineers are moving in full force. So like just making sure that product is being developed very, very fast. You're either dying or growing as a company. I think what I mean by that is iterating, not creating friction, letting the team like build fast, giving them really good support systems on ideas that are not a waste of time. There are some ideas that we have that are just like not so good. It's not working anymore. Maybe we try this or that. And I think there's a lot of that happening in our company. And the other thing is honestly just getting out there and doing sales. So like getting on sales phone calls, like talking to customers, understanding their needs. How do we help them? And an example would be like a company that has like a finance team that's like super flustered and burned out and tired. They're just exhausted of like working with too much. So like, how do we take a little bit off their plate and let them do more of like the other stuff? So, there's a lot of companies that struggle in the accounts receivable department. And, I think it's a good problem to have, but also a bad problem to have. Good because you have a lot of revenue, bad because you're simply not on top of it and collecting it on time. But, as a founder, you kind of just do whatever job is necessary that week, right? So it's
100%.
It's a variable job.
And kind of a follow-up to what you were talking about, recruiting new people. So our company specializes in marketing. From your standpoint, how easy is it to attract and retain high-quality marketing team members right now, given the environment that you were speaking of?
There's some really high-quality marketers out there. I think they're out there, and I think that they're looking for jobs. So, last week I went to an event and there was just a rock star like marketer who worked at some of the best companies in the world and just helped grow those. And people like that are looking for jobs right now. So it's actually good for startups. It's a good time for startups because people are very open-minded. Pre 2021, 2020, I think people are way more selective in a bad way. So like, who's going to throw more money at me, right? Like, that's great and all. You can get a little bit more money, but is it the job you truly want, right? So like, I do think people are being a little less selective now, but also more open-minded to like working at a startup. You can get high-powered, good people, that are very high functioning and like they execute fast to like work with you because they've seen the market like go down and it's just been rough, like with layoffs and everything there. So people are way more understanding of startups than they have been in a long time, with just what their asks are. In the past, 2020, 2021, it was like, hey, will you do my laundry? I live in Silicon Valley. These are literally the things that you're competing against. It's like, do they have a massage therapist on staff that like, if you're stressed out, do they have like a vibe room? Like literally it was like that. It was very much like, how do we compete with that as a startup? And it's really hard when you just don't offer those things, because like those things are great and all, but like you're trying to build a business. Again, culturally, you pick what you want to inject into your business. But WeWork was a great example. They had kombucha on tap, right? You're competing with like working for WeWork where they have kombucha on tap, and it's like, we don't have kombucha on tap. Now I think people don't care about the kombucha. I don't think they care about
Right.
they're not looking at the massage therapist or the laundry. They're looking at like, can I work with these people? Are they smart people? Do I have a connection with them? Can I trust them that I'm not going to get like mass laid off at this company? And do I believe in the mission? Like, it's a really nice mix of all of those things. So there is a strange thing that happens in society, and startups may or may not realize it, but like in downturns, great companies are created. Like Microsoft was created in a downturn. I don't know if you know that. The
Of
markets
course.
were bad. Disney
Hmm.
was created in a downturn. Markets were bad. In downturns, more talent is released into the public markets because of layoffs and whatnot, and they're more open-minded to work with startups like a Disney or a whatever, one of these companies. So for me, it's a weird inflow of people, and you can see it. Like if you go to, they have these really great sites like layoffs.fyi. I don't know if you've ever heard of that
I haven't
website.
heard of that. No.
It gives you a pulse like, okay, this company just laid off 3,000 people. This company laid off 10,000 people. This company laid off 2,000 people. This company laid off 200 people. This company laid off 50 people. You could just see the outflow of like this really good talent. And the larger companies just kind of do it in a mass like swath, right? So like these are really smart people that are just let go and they're just out there. But it also creates like a sour taste in some employees' mouths when like there's just a mass layoff that's just like
100%.
unjustified, because sometimes like the company is doing really well and the company just cuts a large team, and those people are looking for a startup and they want to work in a startup and they want to be empowered and they want to do something unique and different. I mean, I was interviewing a guy this week, and he works at a really large company, and he's just not doing anything there. Like, this is another problem with large companies. You don't feel that value. Like at a startup, everybody counts, right? Like every person in a small company. What's a small company? Like sub 50 people, like sub 100 people, like less than 100 people is a startup in my eyes. Like everyone there counts, and like when someone's performing or not. In a large company of like 30,000 people, I think people are sidelined a lot, and not intentionally. They want to contribute, but there's a lot of maybe politics or bureaucracy. Not every company is this way. I feel like there's some really great companies, but some companies are slow moving and bureaucratic, which is actually to their detriment, because as AI comes out and they're sitting, fat and happy, like that's a really bad trait if like AI is just coming out to like eat your lunch and like do something disruptive. What's an example? Like law firms, right? Like if you're a, traditional law firm that's been doing law, you know what you're doing it well, you're doing it right. But when another law firm is using AI to do more work with less people, that tells you something, right?
Right.
Another example is like professors in university, right? They say you're a professor that's been teaching for 40 years and you just know how to teach students, but now AI is here and it's teaching them at a fast rate. Just ignoring AI is not the right answer. So it's like there's this stressor out there that's creating, I call it a K curve, where you have people that are learning and they're getting way more adaptive and faster, and their teams are nimble and moving quick. And then like the lower part of the K is like the people that are just like not innovating. So it's just going to be more of a struggle long term for those types of companies.
100%. And to add on to that a little bit, I've worked at a startup. I worked at a startup for 2 years and I really enjoyed the environment, but my day to day was very different than when I worked at a Fortune 500 company after that, right? In the sense of that my day to day at a startup could be like I was hired on for sales, right? But it could be operations that day, or I need to help another team member with this because there's only 4 people in our office, right? So if we're falling behind, somewhere else is picking up the slack where it's needed, right, as a team. And I think that culture is really number one. It's really hard to build, as you kind of mentioned earlier, like hiring the right people that want to be in that culture and kind of are motivated to be in that culture, right? Because like you were saying, if they're transitioning from a bigger company where they were kind of put on the sidelines, it's a tough transition, I think, at least in my opinion, to go from, okay, we have a 4-week sprint this week, especially in the coding space. Like I have buddies that code and are software developers, and it's like, okay, well, you have this project due in 2 months. Like, okay, I finished that in 3 days. Like I don't need to, I can sit and hang out and I'll spend my time. I'm not saying this is every company by any means, but then you switch to a startup, like you're kind of saying, you're like, well, okay, I need the code in 3 days or less. Like this has to get out. We have a demo due this week. We have all these other things going on. So it's just a different environment. And I think it's a good shift. I think that's what people get fulfilled by, especially that are passionate about what they do, right? They want to be doing something every day that they feel is fulfilling to them, right? So
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And you know, it's going to be an interesting next 10 years. You're going to see a lot of shifts in just who the players are, and I think it's going to be a fun time, and in a really positive way, where you're going to see a lot of good value being created very, very quickly, and everybody's going to want to use it. And it's going to be in the finance space, it's going to be in the robotic space with AI, it's going to be in the general broad, like how do we help humans in just so many areas. There's a lot of robotic tasks that people just don't want to do. AI is just going to really help. But what you're saying is like startups are going to be very nimble, and they're going to be executing at like very fast paces, and people expect a lot. I think that's the one thing. If you don't want to have that lifestyle, I don't recommend the startup lifestyle,
right,
like working for a startup, because it is stressful. And if you want to take a 3-week vacation, it's definitely harder at a startup than like at a large firm. Like if you're at a large law firm or you work for the government, you may have like more just leeway, because in a startup, every dollar counts, every minute counts. You're just optimizing to get to that like success point.
100%. And kind of on the question, shifting a little bit, what are the most important metrics for you right now with JustPaid? Is it client acquisition, pipeline velocity, retention of the people that do use JustPaid right now, product usage, or is it kind of something completely different?
Every single everything you just named is super important. I think getting our existing users like delightful, like smiling, like wanting to recommend it. I got a text yesterday from one of our existing users, and they said, I have a lead for you. I'm like, more of that is great, because that person loves our software. They love using it. Then on the other side, the person that's paying them with the accounts receivable platform said, I want to use this, right? So like there's just delight that you want to create, and I think like delight is so important to like making our software like amazing and people wanting to use it. There's word of mouth, but I think sales are super important also. So you want sales happening at a fast velocity. So like marketing is important, sales are important, users are important, logins are important, making sure the software is doing what like our customers need it to do. I mean, we're talking to customers daily on the software and just refining it and tweaking it and making it better. So it's definitely a daily process, like of all of this stuff, like getting new customers, taking care of the old customers. But for me, there's no one thing at this moment. It's like all of those things are just critical to make the company successful.
100%. So it's just a balancing act, right? Like some days this is what we really need to focus on. This is the feedback we got from a customer, or our pipeline's kind of slowing down on the sales side. How do we ramp that up and put the right tools in place so that our sales and our SDRs can be effective, right? So it's a great answer, I think. And kind of going off that, looking ahead for the next 12 months, what is JustPaid's goal, and even maybe some personal goals that you have?
Yeah. I think company goals is to get as agentic as possible. It means allowing the user to use it with less input, and it making smart decisions for the user with the user's approval. And like an example of that is like airplanes have autopilot, and they trust autopilot, they set it, but they're always like looking at it and monitoring it. Like we want to create a really nice autopilot experience where the user's never going to go away from our software. You always want people like looking at the finances and like making sure things are correct, but at a faster scale with more customer, as you're gathering more customers, you want it to be really a delightful experience. We're moving in the direction of like having a really modern API. So, how do we create a really elegant API for people that people can use in a really, really simple way, so developers can use it? And it's just, again, there were some companies created 10 years ago, 15 years ago that have APIs, but now they're starting to look a little dated, if that makes sense. So we're trying to figure out how to modernize a lot of that. There is a debate inside of our company, we want to create more of a fee for time type of experience. So like if you use some resource, you should be paid for that. And it should be more of like a different experience where, in the past you work for a month and you get your payment. But like long term, we're looking for like a way to have usage fee happen faster. And we're just kind of like looking at that and seeing like where we could go with that. There's a lot of initiatives internally. I mean, there's a lot more that we're taking on there.
Of course, and that makes a lot of sense. And could you expand a little bit on the usage a little bit? I haven't heard that before in the agentic space. If you're open to talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, like a resource costs money, right? Right now, there's like fee for service. I'm kind of butchering this, but my co-founders are very, very bought into this concept of a resource is being used. Immediately, it should be billed for that resource. So imagine getting your salary minute by minute, like instead of at the end of the month. It's a lot of backwards looking. Like, okay, you did all of this work, backwards looking, you get this salary, here's your salary. We're looking at it like, okay, there's a resource. If you utilize that resource like a token, how do we get someone paid as fast as possible? And another is like, let's say someone answers a question. Say you have an agentic bot and it just answers support questions. If the question is answered, we're looking at it like, how do we get payment for the answered question and build an API for that? It's more of a like service based off of success fee type of model that we're looking at and seeing like, how would this work in the future? A lot of what is going on in payments is based off of just what we've done in the past. Like as crazy as it sounds, like the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. Why is that there? Because Henry Ford created the Ford factory and just said, we're going to take Saturday and Sunday and then people will not work those days. And then suddenly it like propagated across the world. It's just the de facto. But the reality is like payments are very similar where we have this old infrastructure that we've all just accepted. It's called ACH. It's one of it.
Right.
It's just an older model. And I'm like, in an agentic world, when an agent does some successful work, can we get them paid? Can we get a company paid for that agentic work? So we are looking at like AI companies in particular, but broader than that. But like I'm just using AI as an example where you have support agents and the support agent will answer questions and there's 5 questions answered within like a fraction of a second and they're successful answers. Whatever it is, like, I lost my password. How do I get into this? If the agent says, this is how, maybe it's a voice agent, maybe it's on the phone, right?
Right.
And it answers it and it goes, is this satisfy you? And the person's like, yes, this was great. Thank you so much. What we would do is trigger a payment to our customers. Our customer would pay them. I hope that makes sense. It's kind of
No, yeah, that makes 100% sense. I just wanted to understand a little better because I know that some of the people that watch also are involved in that space and maybe haven't heard that before. I mean, I kind of like restructuring how the payment system has worked for decades, right? And even longer than that. So that's like a huge piece of information. And I think that's something to think about, right? I mean, you were saying down the road that might be something you implement. And I think it's just good to be having that discussion in the first place. Like, how do we really change how things are and to a more AI like future and a more technologically advanced future, right? So I think that's a huge thing to be thinking about. So thank you for sharing. But yeah, just to the last question I have for you, it's a little bit of a tough one, but it's kind of fun. If you had a magic wand and could solve one problem within your business, what would that be?
I mean, for me, it's just way more breadth of marketing. As a startup, we don't have a budget like the large guys out there. For us, the marketing side, I would love to do way more there. We're always strategically under-resourced, understaffed, which is part of, this is just every startup out there. They're under-resourced and understaffed. When you have companies like Google, they're cash rich, right? Like they have so much cash. Apple, cash rich. So for us, we're understaffed and under-resourced. So it's like, that's part of the fun of the constraint of being in a startup is you have to look at like, how do we strategically use every dollar appropriately? But if I had a magic wand, it's like, okay, let's solve that problem and get out there in a way bigger way where people have all heard of us. There's also like a naming game. Like people just haven't heard of us in the market. We're not like I don't know, what's a big company out there that you can name, and it's just like we just don't have that yet, so we're working on it.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. I think that's a great answer, and I think a lot of startups are kind of in the same boat too. Just we want to get our name out there, and I think the trouble is not only getting it out there and paying for marketing or whatever resource you want to use, but how do you do it effectively, right? I think that's a big point that's being talked about, not only just by you, but by a lot of people in the space. I think a lot of people are unhappy with some of their marketing initiatives and the people they have paid. And like we said earlier, just like if I spend money on this tool, it's the same thing with marketing. If I spend money on this marketing and they ask me to pay for ads, then that might be me being in the red if they don't generate the right leads or the right people, right, that we want to talk to. So I think that's a huge point. But to wrap up, if people want to connect with you, Daniel, or learn more about what JustPaid is doing, where can they go and how can they connect?
Yeah, so you can go to our website, JustPaid.ai, and then on there you could just go to see a demo. And what's great is you could request the founders be on, so that's a good way to get in contact with me. And then you get a demo of JustPaid, you get a sense of what we do. I'm also on LinkedIn. You could always add me on LinkedIn as well. But probably the best way is just to go to our website, JustPaid.ai, and then you can just sign up for that demo and get connected.